Harold Martinez sat on the old wooden chair in his small house. His hands shook a little as he held the letter from the hospital. The words on the paper were hard to read, but he knew what they meant. The doctor said he needed more tests. The tests cost a lot of money. Money that Harold did not have. He was 95 years old then. His wife Maria had died 5 years ago. She was the love of his life. They had been married for 60 years. When she got sick, Harold spent all their savings, trying to help her. He sold their car. He sold her jewelry. He even sold his good piano, the one he had played for 40 years. But it was not enough. Maria died anyway. Now Harold was alone in the house. The house was too big for just one person. It had 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. Harold and Maria had bought it when they were young. They thought they would fill it with children and grandchildren. They did have 3 children. Robert was the oldest. He lived in New York now. Sarah lived in Texas with her husband. The youngest, Michael, lived in Oregon. Harold loved his children. He was proud of them. Robert was a lawyer. Sarah was a nurse. Michael worked for a computer company. They all had good jobs and nice families, but they were busy, very busy. They called Harold once a month, maybe twice. They visited once a year, usually at Christmas. The house was getting old, just like Harold. The roof leaked when it rained. The heater did not work well in winter. The paint was coming off the walls. Harold tried to fix things himself, but his hands were not strong anymore. His back hurt when he bent down. His eyes were not good. Sometimes he could not see small things clearly. Harold had been a music teacher for 45 years. He taught piano to children at the local school. He also gave private lessons in his home. Children loved him. Parents trusted him. He was patient and kind. He never got angry when a child played the wrong notes. He would just smile and say, "Try again. Music takes time to learn." But Harold had to stop teaching 3 years ago. His hearing was getting bad. Sometimes he could not hear if a child was playing the right notes. His hands shook too much to show them how to play. The school found a younger teacher to take his place. Harold understood. It was time for him to rest. Now Harold lived on a small pension from the government. It was not much money, just enough to buy food and pay for electricity. But the house needed repairs. The doctor bills were piling up. Harold owed the hospital $3,000. The pharmacy wanted money for his heart medicine. His blood pressure pills cost $60 every month. Harold looked around his living room. There were pictures of Maria everywhere, pictures of their children when they were young, pictures of Harold playing piano at school concerts. Those were happy times, times when Harold felt useful and loved. The phone rang. Harold walked slowly to answer it. His legs were stiff and sore. "Hello, Dad." It was Robert, his oldest son. "Hello, Robert. How are you?" "I'm fine, Dad. Listen, I got your letter about the medical bills." Harold had written to all 3 of his children. He asked for help with the doctor bills. He did not like asking for money. It made him feel ashamed, but he did not know what else to do. "Sarah and Michael and I have been talking," Robert said. "We think you need to sell the house." Harold's heart sank. He had expected this, but it still hurt to hear it. "The house is too big for you," Robert continued, "and it needs too many repairs. If you sell it, you can pay the medical bills. You can move to a nice place where people can take care of you." "You mean a nursing home," Harold said quietly. "It's called assisted living, Dad. It's very nice. They have activities, other people your age to talk to, nurses to help you with your medicine." Harold sat down in his chair. He felt very tired. Suddenly, But this is my home, Robert. Your mother and I lived here for 50 years. You and Sarah and Michael grew up here. This is where all my memories are. I know, Dad, but you can't take care of yourself anymore. What if you fall down? What if you get sick? Who will help you? Harold wanted to say that his children could help him, but he knew they lived far away. They had their own lives, their own problems. Robert had just gotten divorced. Sarah's husband had lost his job. Michael had 2 young children to take care of. Think about it, Dad, Robert said. We'll help you. Find a good place, somewhere clean and safe. After Robert hung up, Harold sat in his chair for a long time. The house was very quiet. Too quiet. He missed the sound of children practicing piano. He missed Maria's voice calling him for dinner. He missed feeling needed. 2 weeks later, Sarah came to visit. She brought boxes and tape. We need to pack. Your things, Dad, she said. Robert found a place for you. Sunset Manor. It's very nice. Harold had already seen Sunset Manor. It was not nice. The rooms were small and smelled like cleaning supplies. The food was bad. The nurses were always busy and sometimes rude. The other old people there looked sad and tired. Many of them just sat in chairs all day, staring at the television. But Harold did not argue. He let Sarah pack his clothes and a few pictures. She said there was no room for his books or his records. No room for the small piano he had bought to replace the one he sold. You won't need these things, Dad, Sarah said. The nursing home has a piano in the main room. You can play it sometimes. Harold knew that piano would be old and broken. He knew the other residents would not want to hear music. Old people in nursing homes just wanted to be left alone. The house sold quickly. A young family bought it. They had 2 small children. Harold was happy that children would live in the house again. Maybe they would play in the backyard like his own children had done. After paying the medical bills and the lawyers, there was enough money to pay for 2 years at Sunset Manor. Harold's children promised to help with the costs after that. But Harold wondered if they would remember their promise. Harold's first night at Sunset Manor was the hardest night of his life. His room was tiny, just a bed, a small table, and 1 chair. There was no window. The walls were white and empty. Harold lay on the narrow bed and listened to an old man in the next room coughing all night. Harold thought about Maria. He thought about his children when they were young. He thought about all the students he had taught to play piano. He wondered if any of them still played music. He wondered if any of them remembered their old teacher. Harold closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but sleep would not come. For the first time in many years, Harold Martinez felt completely alone in the world. Harold had been living at Sunset Manor for 6 months. Every day was the same. He woke up at 6 in the morning when the nurses turned on the lights in the hallway. The breakfast was always cold eggs and burnt toast. The coffee tasted like water. After breakfast, most of the old people went back to their rooms or sat in the main room watching television. The TV was always too loud. The shows were boring. Harold did not like watching TV all day. It made him feel more lonely. Harold tried to make friends with the other people at Sunset Manor. There was Mrs. Chen, who had been a teacher like him. But she had trouble remembering things. Sometimes she thought Harold was her son. Sometimes she did not know where she was. There was Mr. Johnson, who had been a bus driver for 30 years. He liked to tell the same stories over and over again, about the time it snowed so hard he could not drive the bus, about the little girl who forgot her lunchbox. Harold listened to the stories many times, but he did not mind. Mr. Johnson was lonely, too. The worst part about Sunset Manor was the smell. It smelled like old people and sadness. The windows did not open. The air was always stale. Harold missed the fresh air in his old house. He missed opening the windows in spring and hearing the birds sing. Harold's children called him once a week. The calls were always short. "How are you feeling, Dad? Are you eating well? Do you need anything?" Harold always said he was fine. He did not want to worry them. He did not want them to feel guilty. But Harold was not fine. He was getting weaker every day. The food was not good. He was losing weight. His clothes were loose on his thin body. The nurses gave him pills for his heart and his blood pressure, but Harold felt worse, not better. The piano in the main room was old and broken, just like Harold had expected. Half the keys did not work. The other half were out of tune. Harold tried to play it once, but it sounded terrible. The other residents complained that the noise was too loud. They wanted to watch their TV shows in peace. Harold stopped trying to play the piano. He stopped trying to make friends. He spent most of his time in his small room, looking out the tiny window at the parking lot. Sometimes he saw families visiting other residents, parents with children, grandchildren with flowers. Harold's children had not visited since the day they brought him to Sunset Manor. After 8 months at Sunset Manor, Harold got sick. He had a bad cold that turned into something worse. He could not breathe well. He was very hot, then very cold. The nurses said he had pneumonia. They took him to the hospital. Harold spent 2 weeks in the hospital. The doctors gave him medicine through tubes in his arm. Machines beeped all around him. He was very scared. He thought he might die alone in that cold, white room. Robert came to visit Harold in the hospital. He looked worried and tired. "You're going to be okay, Dad," he said. But Harold could see in Robert's eyes that he was not sure. "I don't want to go back to Sunset Manor," Harold told his son. "Please don't make me go back there." Robert held Harold's hand. "Where else can you go, Dad? You can't live alone anymore. You're too sick." "I could live with you," Harold said quietly. "Or with Sarah, or Michael. I won't be any trouble, I promise." Robert looked away. Harold knew what that meant. Robert did not want him to live in his house. None of his children wanted him. "It's not that simple, Dad," Robert said. "I work long hours. I travel for my job. There's no one to take care of you during the day." Harold nodded. He understood. But understanding did not make it hurt less. When Harold got better, he had to go back to Sunset Manor. But something had changed. Harold felt different, angrier. He had almost died, and his children had not even stayed with him in the hospital. Robert visited for 1 day, then went back to New York. Sarah and Michael did not come at all. Harold realized that his children were waiting for him to die. They had put him in Sunset Manor to forget about him. They called once a week to feel better about themselves, but they did not really care what happened to him. This made Harold very sad, but it also made him determined. He was 96 years old, but he was not dead yet. He did not want to spend his last years sitting in a chair waiting to die. Harold started walking around Sunset Manor more. He talked to the nurses and the cleaning people. He learned their names and asked about their families. Maria, the cleaning lady, had 3 children. She worked 2 jobs to pay for their school clothes. James, the night security guard, was studying to be a nurse. He worked at Sunset Manor to pay for his classes. These people were kind to Harold. They had hard lives, but they were not bitter. They smiled when they saw him. They had time to talk. Unlike the nurses who were always busy, Harold also started eating more. The food was still bad. but Harold forced himself to eat it. He needed to be strong. He did not know why yet, but he felt like something important was going to happen. He needed to be ready. One day, Harold was walking in the hallway when he heard piano music. Real piano music, not from the TV or a radio. Someone was playing the old broken piano in the main room. Harold followed the sound. A young woman was sitting at the piano. She had long black hair and was wearing jeans and a sweater. She was playing classical music, something by Mozart. Her fingers moved quickly over the keys. Even though the piano was out of tune, the music was beautiful. Harold stood in the doorway and listened. For the first time in months, he felt happy. The music reminded him of when he was young, when he first learned to play piano, when he taught children who loved music as much as he did. The young woman finished playing and saw Harold watching her. She smiled. "Hello," she said. "I'm sorry if the music was too loud. I'm Lisa. I volunteer here on weekends." "Don't be sorry," Harold said. "That was beautiful. I haven't heard real music in a long time." Lisa looked surprised. "You like classical music?" "I used to be a piano teacher," Harold said. "I taught for 45 years. Lisa's eyes lit up. "Really? Would you like to play something?" Harold shook his head. "The piano is broken, and my hands, they're not what they used to be." "Maybe we could play together," Lisa said. "You could tell me what to play, and I could play it." Harold thought about this. It had been so long since he had made music with another person. So long since anyone had asked for his opinion about music. "I would like that," Harold said quietly. That was the beginning of Harold's friendship with Lisa. She came every Saturday and Sunday. They would sit at the old piano together. Lisa would play, and Harold would tell her about the music, about the composers, about how to make the music more beautiful. The other residents at Sunset Manor started gathering around the piano when Lisa and Harold played. Even Mrs. Chen, who usually forgot everything, would tap her foot to the music. Mr. Johnson would hum along with songs he remembered from when he was young. For the first time since coming to Sunset Manor, Harold felt useful again. He felt like he had something to give. Music was still inside him, even if his hands could not play anymore. He could share his knowledge with Lisa. He could bring joy to the other lonely old people. But Harold's happiness did not last long. After 6 months, Lisa graduated from college and moved to another city. She came to say goodbye to Harold. She hugged him and promised to write letters, but Harold knew he would probably never see her again. After Lisa left, Harold fell into the deepest sadness of his life. The piano sat silent in the main room. The other residents went back to watching TV all day. Harold went back to sitting in his room, staring out the window. Harold's money was running out. Robert had told him that Sunset Manor was getting more expensive. Harold had enough money for maybe 6 more months. After that, he would have to move to a cheaper place. A place that would be even worse than Sunset Manor. Harold lay in his narrow bed at night and wondered what would happen to him. He was 97 years old. His body was weak. His children had forgotten about him. He had no money and no home. For the first time in his life, Harold Martinez felt completely hopeless. The day Harold had been dreading finally came. Mrs. Patterson, the director of Sunset Manor, called him to her office. She was a thin woman with gray hair who always looked tired. She did not smile when Harold sat down in the chair across from her desk. "Mr. Martinez," she said, looking at papers in front of her. "I'm afraid we have a problem. Your account is overdue. You owe us $3,000. Harold's hands shook as he held them in his lap. He had known this day would come, but hearing the words still felt like a punch in his stomach. "I called your son Robert," Mrs. Patterson continued. "He said the family cannot help with the payments anymore. I'm sorry, but we're going to have to ask you to leave." Harold stared at her. "Leave? Where am I supposed to go?" Mrs. Patterson looked uncomfortable. "There are other facilities, cheaper ones. I can give you some phone numbers." Harold knew about the cheaper places. He had seen them when Robert was looking for nursing homes. They were horrible places where old people went to die, places with bugs and dirty sheets and mean nurses who did not care about the residents. "How long do I have?" Harold asked quietly. 2 weeks, Mrs. Patterson said. "I'm sorry, I really am. But this is a business. We can't keep residents who can't pay." Harold walked back to his room on shaking legs. 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, he would be homeless. At 97 years old, he would be living on the streets like a beggar. Harold called Robert that night. "Did you know they're throwing me out?" he asked his son. Robert sighed. "Dad, I tried to help, but Sarah's husband is still out of work. Michael's kids need braces. I just got divorced and had to pay a lot of money to lawyers. We don't have $3,000. "What am I supposed to do?" Harold asked. "Where am I supposed to live?" "There are programs for old people who don't have money," Robert said. "The government will help you." But Harold had already looked into those programs. The waiting lists were months long. The cheap nursing homes were full. The government help was not much help at all. Harold spent the next 2 weeks making phone calls. He called every cheap nursing home in the city. They were all full. He called social services. They put him on waiting lists. He called churches. They said they would pray for him, but they could not give him a place to live. On Harold's last day at Sunset Manor, no one came to help him move. Robert was in New York on business. Sarah was taking care of her sick husband. Michael was busy with his children. Harold packed his few belongings into 2 old suitcases. His clothes, a few pictures of Maria, and his old music books. Mrs. Patterson gave Harold the phone numbers of homeless shelters. "I'm sorry it came to this," she said. But Harold could see she was already thinking about the new resident who would take his room. Harold took a taxi to the closest homeless shelter. The driver looked at him strangely. "You sure this is where you want to go, old man?" he asked. The shelter was in a bad part of the city. There were men drinking alcohol on the street corners. There was garbage everywhere. The building was old and dirty. Harold paid the taxi driver with some of his last money and walked inside. The shade shelter was full of homeless people. Young men who smelled like drugs, old men who talked to themselves, women with children who looked scared and tired. Harold had never seen such sadness in one place. A worker at the shelter looked at Harold's paperwork. "You can stay 3 nights," she said. "Then you have to leave for a week before you can come back." The room where Harold slept had 20 beds. The men around him coughed and snored all night. Some of them talked in their sleep, others cried. Harold lay on the thin mattress and wondered how his life had come to this. During the day, Harold walked around the city. He did not know where to go or what to do. He was too old and weak to get a job. He was too proud to beg for money. His feet hurt from walking, but he had nowhere to sit except on park benches. After 3 days, Harold had to leave the shelter. He spent the night sitting on a bench in the park. It was cold, and he did not sleep at all. In the morning, he was tired and hungry, and more scared than he had ever been in his life. Harold tried to call his children, but they did not answer their phones. He left messages, but they did not call back. He realized that they were ashamed of him. They did not want to talk to their homeless father. Harold found another shelter across town. This one was even worse than the first. The food was terrible. The bathrooms were dirty. Some of the homeless people were dangerous. Harold kept to himself and tried to stay safe, but Harold could only stay at each shelter for a few days. Then, he had to find somewhere else to sleep. Sometimes he slept in the park. Sometimes he found an all-night restaurant where he could sit for hours with 1 cup of coffee. Sometimes he walked all night because it was too dangerous to sleep outside. Harold's clothes became dirty and torn. He could not shower every day. His hair grew long and messy. People on the street looked at him with disgust or fear. They crossed to the other side of the street when they saw him coming. Harold had become invisible. Shop owners told him to move, along when he tried to rest outside their stores. Police officers asked him for ID and told him he could not sleep in certain places. Children pointed at him, and their parents pulled them away. The worst part was not the hunger or the cold or the fear. The worst part was feeling worthless. Harold had been a good man his whole life. He had worked hard. He had raised 3 children. He had taught hundreds of students to love music, but none of that mattered now. Now he was just another dirty old homeless man that nobody wanted to see. Harold's suitcases were too heavy to carry everywhere. He found a shopping cart behind a grocery store and put his things in it. Now he looked like all the other homeless, people pushing their lives around in shopping carts. Winter was coming, and Harold knew he might not survive it. He was losing weight because he could not afford to eat every day. He was getting sick more often. His heart medicine was running out, and he had no money to buy more. One cold November day, Harold was walking past a community center. Through the window, he saw something that made him stop. There was an old piano in a big room. Some children were playing around it, but no one was playing music. Harold stood outside in the cold looking at that piano. He had not touched piano keys in over a year. His fingers ached to play again. Music had been his life for so many years. Even now, when he had lost everything else, he still had music in his heart. Harold pushed his shopping cart to the front door of the community center. A sign said, "Everyone welcome." Harold was not sure if that included homeless people, but he was too desperate to care. Inside, the community center was warm and bright. There were people playing basketball in one room, mothers with small children in another room, and in the back, there was the piano room, mostly empty. A woman with kind eyes saw Harold standing in the doorway. She was about 50 years old, with graying hair and a gentle smile. "Can I help you?" she asked. Harold was embarrassed by how he looked and smelled. "I was wondering," he said quietly, "if I could sit in here for a while. It's very cold outside." The woman looked at Harold's shopping cart and his dirty clothes, but she did not look disgusted or afraid like most people did. Of course, she said, "I'm Maria Santos. I run this community center. You're welcome to stay as long as you need." Harold could not believe it. Someone was being kind to him. Someone was treating him like a human being. "Thank you," Harold said, and his voice was shaky with emotion. "My name is Harold Martinez." Maria showed Harold to the piano room. "You can rest here," she said. "There's a bathroom down the hall if you need it, and we usually have coffee and sandwiches at lunchtime." Harold sat in a chair near the piano and felt something he had not felt in months: hope. Maybe, just maybe, he had found a place where he could belong again. A place where he could remember who he used to be before he became just another homeless old man. Harold looked at the piano and felt his fingers tingle. Soon, he told himself. Soon he would play again. Music was the only thing he had left, and he was not going to let anyone take that away from him. Harold had been coming to the community center for 2 weeks. Every morning he would push his shopping cart through the front door and nod to Maria Santos. She always smiled and said good morning like he was a normal person, not a homeless man. Harold spent most of his time in the piano room. During the busy hours, children ran around and played games. But in the quiet afternoon hours, the room was mostly empty. Harold would sit in his chair and look at the old piano. His fingers moved silently, remembering songs he used to play. The piano was not in good shape. It was at least 30 years old. Some of the keys stuck when you pressed them. Others made no sound at all. The wood was scratched and faded. But to Harold it was the most beautiful thing he had seen in months. Maria noticed Harold staring at the piano. One afternoon she sat down in the chair next to him. "Do you play?" she asked. Harold nodded. "I used to. A long time ago." "Would you like to try it?" Harold's heart started beating faster. "I don't know if I remember how. It's been over a year since I played anything." "Music is like riding a bicycle," Maria said. "You never really forget." Harold stood up slowly. His legs were stiff from sitting. He walked to the piano bench and sat down. The keys were yellow with age and dirty from children's hands. Harold placed his hands on the keyboard and felt something wake up inside him. Harold pressed middle C. The note was out of tune, but it was still music. He pressed C, D, E, F, G, a simple scale. His fingers remembered where to go. Then Harold began to play Amazing Grace. His hands shook a little, and he missed some notes, but the melody was there, soft and sweet and full of hope. Maria sat very still and listened. When Harold finished, she had tears in her eyes. "That was beautiful," she said. "You're very talented." Harold looked down at his hands. They were dirty and old, but they could still make music. "I was a piano teacher for 45 years, he said quietly. "Really? Where did you teach?" Harold told Maria about his years at Roosevelt Elementary School, about the hundreds of children he had taught, about the school concerts and the proud parents, about how much he loved sharing music with young people. "What happened?" Maria asked gently. "How did you end up?" Harold told her everything, about Maria dying and the medical bills, about selling his house and going to Sunset Manor, about his money running out and his children not being able to help, about becoming homeless at 97 years old. Maria listened without judging. When Harold finished his story, she was quiet for a long time. "I'm sorry," she finally said. "That must have been very hard." Harold nodded. "I never thought I would end up like this, but here I am." "Would you like to play the piano here sometimes?" Maria asked. "In the afternoons when it's quiet?" Harold could not believe what he was hearing. "You would let me do that?" "Of course. Music makes everything better, and this old piano needs someone who knows how to play it properly." That afternoon, Harold played for 2 hours. He played hymns and classical pieces and old love songs. His fingers were stiff at first, but they got stronger as he played. The music flowed out of him like water from a broken dam. Some of the other people at the community center heard the music and came to listen. Mrs. Rodriguez, who brought her grandchildren there after school. Mr. Kim, who was taking English classes. Even some of the homeless people who came in to get warm. They sat quietly and listened to Harold play. Nobody talked or made noise. They just let the music wash over them. When Harold finished playing, everyone clapped. Harold felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt appreciated. He felt like he mattered. "Play some more," said a little girl named Sophia. She was about 7 years old with big brown eyes. That was pretty. Harold smiled and played "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." Sophia clapped her hands and sang along. Soon other children joined in. They gathered around the piano and sang while Harold played. For the first time in months, Harold felt happy. Really happy. He was making music again. He was bringing joy to children again. Even though he was homeless and poor, he still had something valuable to give. Harold started coming to the community center every day. He would arrive in the morning and help Maria with small jobs. He could not lift heavy things, but he could fold papers and answer the phone. He made himself useful. In the afternoons, Harold played piano. Word spread around the neighborhood that there was an old man at the community center who played beautiful music. More people started coming to listen. Harold learned the names of the children who came regularly. There was Marcus, who was 8 and wanted to learn to play piano. There was Isabella, who loved to sing along with the music. There was little Tommy, who was only 4, but who sat very still and listened to every song. Harold started teaching Marcus how to play simple songs. Marcus's fingers were small, but he was eager to learn. Harold was patient with him, just like he had been with all his students over the years. "You're a natural teacher," Maria told Harold one day. "Have you thought about giving lessons here?" Harold shook his head. "I don't have anywhere to live. I can't keep regular hours. I'm homeless, Maria. Nobody wants to take piano lessons from a homeless man." But Maria had an idea. "What if we started a music program here? Free lessons for kids whose families can't afford them. You could be the teacher." Harold thought about this. "But I still don't have anywhere to live. Some nights I sleep in the park, some nights I stay at shelters. I can't commit to a regular schedule." "We'll figure something out," Maria said. "Good teachers are hard to find, especially teachers who care as much as you do." That night, Harold slept in the park again. It was getting colder, and he was worried about winter coming. But for the first time in months, he had hope. Maybe he could have a purpose again. Maybe his life was not over yet. The next day, Maria had news for Harold. "I talked to my boss," she said. "The community center has a small apartment upstairs. It's not much, just 1 room and a bathroom. But you could live there in exchange for teaching music classes." Harold could not believe it. "You would let me live here?" "You're already here 12 hours a day," Maria laughed. "And the kids love you. It makes sense." Harold looked around the community center. It was not fancy, but it was warm and safe. There were people here who cared about each other. There were children who needed to learn music. "I would like that very much," Harold said. That weekend, Harold moved his few belongings from his shopping cart into the small apartment upstairs. It had a bed, a table, a chair, and a tiny kitchen. There was a window that looked out over the neighborhood. It was the first real home Harold had had in over a year. Harold started teaching piano lessons 3 days a week. He had 6 students, all children from the neighborhood. Their families could not afford to pay for lessons, but Harold did not care about money. He cared about sharing music. Marcus was his best student. The 8-year-old boy practiced every day and learned new songs quickly. Isabella loved to sing while Harold played. Tommy was still too young for lessons, but he sat quietly and listened. To every class, Harold also played concerts on Friday evenings. People from the neighborhood would come to listen. Some were families with children. Some were old people who lived alone. Some were other homeless people who had nowhere else to go. Harold played music for everyone. Classical pieces for the adults, who appreciated complex melodies. Simple songs for the children, hymns for the religious people, popular songs from the 1950s and 1960s for people his own age. The Friday concerts became very popular. Sometimes 30 or 40 people would come to listen. They would sit in folding chairs or on the floor. They would clap after each song and call out requests. Harold felt alive again. He felt useful. He felt loved. The children at the community center became like grandchildren to him. The adults became his friends. Even the other homeless people looked up to him. He had gone from being invisible to being important. One evening, Maria sat down next to Harold after a concert. "You've changed this place," she said. "People are happier when they come here now. The children are more excited about learning. Even the adults smile more." Harold looked around the room. People were talking and laughing as they put away the chairs. Children were hugging their parents and asking when the next concert would be. "Music changes everything," Harold said. "It brings people together. It makes them remember what's beautiful in life." "You've certainly brought beauty into our lives," Maria said. Harold went to sleep that night feeling grateful. He had lost his house and his money and his family, but he had found something more important. He had found his purpose again. He had found a way to matter. Harold was 98 years old, and he was homeless, but he was not hopeless anymore. He had music, and he had people who cared about him. That was enough. That was everything. It was a cold Tuesday morning in February. Harold woke up in his small apartment above the community center feeling tired. He had been having trouble sleeping lately. His old body ached more than usual, and his heart medicine was making him feel dizzy. Harold got dressed slowly and walked downstairs to the piano room. It was early and the center was quiet. This was his favorite time of day, when he could play music without anyone listening. He could practice and remember songs from his past. Harold sat down at the old piano and began to play Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. It was one of the most beautiful pieces of music ever written. Harold had played it thousands of times over the years, but it still moved him every time. As he played, Harold closed his eyes and let the music carry him away. He forgot about being homeless. He forgot about being old and sick. He forgot about his children who never called. All that mattered was the music flowing from his fingers. Harold did not know that someone was watching him. David Chen was a social worker who visited the community center once a week. He helped homeless people find places to live and jobs and medical care. David had heard about the old man who played piano, but he had never actually heard Harold play. David had arrived early for his appointment with Maria. As he walked through the center, he heard the most beautiful piano music coming from the main room. He followed the sound and found Harold at the piano, completely lost in the music. David stood in the doorway and listened. He could not believe what he was hearing. The music was perfect. Every note was clear and emotional. The old man's fingers moved across the keys like he was painting a picture with sound. David took out his phone and started recording. He had never heard anyone play so beautifully. He wanted to share this moment with his wife and friends. As Harold played the final notes of the sonata, David stopped recording. Harold opened his eyes and saw David watching him. He looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry," Harold said. "I didn't know anyone was here. I can stop playing if you need the room." "No, please don't stop," David said, walking into the room. "That was incredible. Where did you learn to play like that?" Harold smiled shyly. I went to music school a very long time ago. Then I taught piano for 45 years. David looked at Harold's worn clothes and tired face. It was hard to believe that this homeless old man was such a talented musician. "Would you play something else?" David asked. "I have a few minutes before my meeting." Harold was happy to play for someone who appreciated music. He played Chopin's Minute Waltz and then The Way You Look Tonight, one of Maria's favorite songs. David listened with amazement. This was not just good piano playing, this was professional-level music. Harold played with the skill of someone who had spent their whole life studying music. After Harold finished playing, David introduced himself. "I'm David Chen. I'm a social worker. I help people who are going through difficult times." "I'm Harold Martinez," Harold said. "I live here at the community center. Maria Santos lets me teach piano lessons and play concerts in exchange for a place to stay." David was curious about Harold's story. How had such a talented musician ended up homeless? Harold told David about losing his wife, selling his house, the nursing home, and his children who could not help him. David listened with growing sadness and anger. How could a man who had given so much to the world end up with nothing? How could Harold's own children abandon him when he needed help the most? "This is wrong," David said. "Someone with your talent should not be living like this." Harold shrugged. "I'm grateful for what I have. Maria has been very kind to me. The children here love music. I have a purpose again." David was impressed by Harold's positive attitude. Most homeless people he worked with were bitter and angry. But Harold seemed at peace with his situation. He had found a way to be happy, even though he had lost everything. After David's meeting with Maria, he could not stop thinking about Harold. On his way home, he looked at the video he had recorded on his phone. The music was even more beautiful than he remembered. That evening, David showed the video to his wife, Jennifer. She was a nurse at the local hospital. She cried when she heard Harold's story. "We have to help him," Jennifer said. "This is not right." David had an idea. He posted the video on his Facebook page with a simple message. "Never judge a book by its cover. This 98-year-old homeless man plays like an angel." David did not expect much to happen. He just wanted to share Harold's beautiful music with his friends and family. But by the next morning, something amazing had happened. The video had been shared hundreds of times. People were commenting and asking questions about Harold. Who was he? Where did he live? How could they help? By that afternoon, the video had been shared thousands of times. Local news stations were calling David, asking for interviews. Newspapers wanted to write stories about Harold. Radio stations wanted to play the video on the air. David was overwhelmed. He had never expected this kind of response. He called Maria at the community center to warn her that reporters might be coming. "Someone recorded Harold playing piano," David explained. "I put it on the internet, and now everyone wants to know about him." Maria was worried. Harold is a very private person. He doesn't like attention. This might upset him. But when Maria told Harold what was happening, he was not upset. He was curious. "People want to hear my music?" Harold asked. "Thousands of people," Maria said. "The video has been watched by people all over the country." Harold could not believe it. He had been invisible for so long. People crossed the street to avoid him. They looked at him with disgust or fear. Now suddenly, people wanted to hear his music. The first reporter arrived that afternoon, Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7 News. She was a kind woman with a gentle voice. She interviewed Harold in the piano room, asking him about his life and his music. Harold told his story honestly. He did not try to make his children look bad. He did not complain or feel sorry for himself. He just explained what had happened and how he had ended up at the community center. Then Jennifer asked Harold to play something. Harold played Amazing Grace, the same song he had played for Maria on his first day at the center. As he played, Jennifer and her camera crew stood quietly and listened. When Harold finished, Jennifer had tears in her eyes. "That was beautiful," she said. "How do you stay so positive after everything you've been through?" Harold thought for a moment. "Music saved my life," he said. "When I lost everything else, I still had music. Music gives me hope. It reminds me that there is still beauty in the world." The news story aired that evening. Harold watched it in his small apartment with Maria. He was embarrassed to see himself on television, but he was proud of his music. After the news story, everything changed for Harold. The video went viral on the internet. Millions of people watched it and shared it. People from all over the world sent messages of support. Money started pouring in. Strangers set up a GoFundMe page to help Harold. In just 3 days, they raised over $50,000. People wanted to help the talented old man who had been forgotten by his own family. Music schools called and offered Harold opportunities to perform. Concert halls wanted to book him for shows. Recording companies wanted to make an album of his music. Harold was overwhelmed by all the attention. He had gone from being invisible to being famous overnight. Reporters called every day. People recognized him on the street. Children asked for his autograph. But the most surprising thing was that Harold's children started calling. Robert called first, then Sarah, then Michael. They had all seen the news story. They were all sorry for what had happened. "Dad, I had no idea things were so bad," Robert said. "I thought you were okay at the nursing home." "I'm sorry we didn't visit more," Sarah said. "We should have done more to help you." "Can you forgive us?" Michael asked. "We want to make things right." Harold listened to his children's apologies. Part of him was happy to hear from them, but part of him was angry. Where had they been when he was sleeping in parks? Where had they been when he was hungry and scared and alone? "I forgive you," Harold told each of them. "But forgiveness doesn't erase the past. I went through hell, and you weren't there to help me." Harold's children wanted to visit him. They wanted to take him out to dinner and show him they cared. But Harold was not ready for that yet. He needed time to think about whether he wanted them back in his life. The attention was exciting, but it was also exhausting. Harold was 98 years old and not used to so much activity. All he really wanted was to play piano and teach children and live peacefully at the community center. Maria helped Harold manage all the requests for interviews and performances. She made sure he got enough rest and was not overwhelmed by all the attention. "Are you happy about all this?" Maria asked Harold one evening. Harold thought about the question. "I'm grateful that people appreciate my music," he said. "But I was happy before the video, too. I had you and the children here and a place to live. That was enough." Harold realized that fame and money could not give him what he really needed. What he needed was purpose and friendship and a place to belong. He had found those things at the community center, not because of the viral video, but because Maria and the children had accepted him when he had nothing. Harold decided that no matter what opportunities came his way. 3 weeks after the video went viral, Harold's life had changed completely. He now had over $100,000 in donations from people around the world. His phone rang constantly with offers to perform at concert halls, appear on television shows, and even write a book about his life. Harold was sitting in his small apartment, looking at all the letters and emails Maria had printed out for him. People from Japan, Germany, Australia, and dozens of other countries had written to tell him how his music had touched their hearts. "Dear Mr. Harold," one letter from a young girl in Canada said, "My grandmother died last year, and I was very sad. When I heard you play piano, it made me feel better. Thank you for sharing your beautiful music with the world." Harold wiped tears from his eyes as he read letter after letter. He had never imagined that his music could reach so many people, or mean so much to them. Maria knocked on his door. "Harold, there's someone here to see you." Harold went downstairs and found a well-dressed man in an expensive suit waiting in the piano room. The man stood up and smiled when he saw Harold. "Mr. Martinez, I'm Richard Thompson from Elite Entertainment Agency. I represent famous musicians and performers. I would like to talk to you about some exciting opportunities." Harold sat down across from the man. He was not used to dealing with business people, and this man made him nervous. "Mr. Martinez, you have incredible talent," Richard said. "With the right management, you could be performing at Carnegie Hall, recording albums, making millions of dollars. I want to help you become a real star." Harold listened politely as Richard explained his plans. Concert tours across the country, television appearances, a recording contract with a major music company, book deals, and movie rights. "It sounds very exciting," Harold said when Richard finished. "But I'm 98 years old. I don't know if I have the energy for all that." "Age doesn't matter," Richard said. "People love your story. The older you are, the more amazing it is that you can still play so beautifully. We could make you the most famous musician in America." Harold thought about Richard's offer. It was tempting to think about playing in famous concert halls and having his music heard by millions of people, but something felt wrong about it. "Can I think about it?" Harold asked. "Of course," Richard said, handing Harold a business card. "But don't wait too long. Fame is like lightning. It strikes fast and disappears just as quickly." After Richard left, Harold sat at the piano and played quietly. He was confused about what to do. Part of him wanted to take advantage of his sudden fame, but part of him was afraid of losing the simple, peaceful life he had built at the community center. That evening, Harold's son Robert called. Harold had not talked to any of his children since the video went viral, even though they had all tried to contact him. "Dad, I saw you on the news again," Robert said. "This is incredible. You're famous." "Yes, it's been quite a surprise," Harold said carefully. "Listen, Dad, I've been thinking, with all this money you're making, maybe you could buy a nice house, or move in with one of us. You don't have to live in that community center anymore." Harold was quiet for a moment. "I like living here, Robert. These people helped me when I had nothing. They're my family now." "But we're your real family," Robert said. "We want to make up for what happened. We want to take care of you now." "Where were you when I was sleeping in parks?" Harold asked. "Where were you when I was hungry and scared and alone?" Robert was quiet. "I know we made mistakes, Dad, but we can't change the past. We can only try to do better now." Harold felt angry, but he also felt sad. He had loved his children so much. It hurt that they only wanted to be part of his life now that he was famous and had money. "I need time to think," Harold told Robert. "I'm not ready to make any big decisions yet." The next day, Harold had his regular piano lesson with Marcus. The 8-year-old boy was getting very good at playing simple songs. Today he was learning "Mary Had a Little Lamb." "Mr. Harold," Marcus said as he practiced, "my mom says you're famous now. Are you going to leave us? Harold's heart broke a little. Why would I leave you? Famous people live in big houses, Marcus said. They don't live in community centers. Harold knelt down so he was at Marcus's eye level. Marcus, I'm not going anywhere. This is my home. You and Isabella and Tommy and all the other children are my family. I would never leave you. Marcus smiled and hugged Harold. Good. I still have a lot to learn about piano. That afternoon, Harold was teaching Isabella how to sing while he played piano. She had a beautiful voice for a 9-year-old. As they practiced You Are My Sunshine, Harold realized how much he loved these simple moments. This was what made him happy. Not the thought of performing at Carnegie Hall or being on television. Just sitting at an old piano, teaching children to love music the way he did. Maria came into the piano room with a troubled look on her face. Harold, we have a problem. The community center's landlord wants to raise our rent. He says now that we're famous because of you, we should pay more money. Harold was upset. That's not fair. You were helping people long before I came here. I know, Maria said. But he says if we can't pay the higher rent, he'll find someone. Who can? Harold thought about the money that people had donated to him. He had more than enough to help the community center pay the higher rent, but he also thought about Richard Thompson's offer. Maybe he could make enough money performing to help not just this community center, but many others. That night, Harold could not sleep. He walked downstairs to the piano room and sat at the old piano. He played softly so he would not wake anyone up. As he played, Harold thought about his choices. He could stay at the community center and live a quiet, simple life, teaching children and playing for small audiences. Or he could become a famous performer and use his success to help more people. Both choices had good points and bad points. If he became famous, he could help more homeless people and support more community centers. But he might lose the personal connections that made his life meaningful. If he stayed at the community center, he could keep teaching the children he loved and living simply. But he might miss the chance to help people on a larger scale. Harold played until the sun came up. By morning, he had made his decision, but he was not sure it was the right one. Harold called Richard Thompson and agreed to meet with him again. But this time, Harold had conditions. I will do some performances, Harold told Richard, but I want to choose where I play and what I play, and I want part of the money to go to homeless shelters and community centers. Richard frowned. That's not how the music business works, Mr. Martinez. If you want to be successful, you have to trust the experts. Then maybe I don't want to be successful in your business, Harold said. I want to use my music to help people, not just to make money. Richard tried to convince Harold to sign a standard contract, but Harold would not change his mind. Finally, Richard left, saying he would find other musicians who were more serious about their careers. After Richard left, Harold felt relieved. He had almost made a mistake. Fame and money were not worth giving up his values and the people he cared about. But Harold still wanted to help other homeless people and community centers. He decided to organize his own concerts and performances. Maria helped him contact local venues and set up a schedule. Harold's first big concert was at the city's main theater. All the tickets were free, but people could donate money if they wanted to. The money would go to homeless shelters and programs for elderly people. The theater was completely full. Over 1,000 people came to hear Harold play. In the audience were the children from the community center, other homeless people Harold had met, and many of the strangers who had been touched by his story. Harold walked onto the stage slowly. His legs were stiff, and he needed Maria's help to sit down at the piano bench. But when he started to play, all his physical problems disappeared. Harold played for 2 hours. Classical pieces, popular songs, and some music he had written himself. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every note. When Harold finished his last song, the entire theater stood up and clapped for 10 minutes. People were crying and cheering. Harold had never felt so much love from so many people at once, but the best moment came after the concert. Marcus, Isabella, Tommy, and the other children from the community center came backstage to hug Harold. "That was the most beautiful music I ever heard," Isabella said. "Are you still going to teach us piano?" Tommy asked. "Of course," Harold said. "You're the most important audience I have." Harold realized that he had found the perfect balance. He could perform for large audiences and raise money to help people, but he could also keep his simple life at the community center with the children who had become his real family. The concert raised $50,000 for homeless programs. Harold felt proud that his music was helping people who were going through the same struggles he had faced. But as Harold went to sleep that night, he thought about his children. Robert, Sarah, and Michael had all called to congratulate him on the concert. But Harold still had not agreed to see them. Harold wondered if he was being too stubborn. Maybe his children really were sorry for abandoning him. Maybe they deserved a chance to make things right. Harold decided that it was time to face his past and figure out if his children could be part of his future. Harold had been avoiding his children's phone calls for 3 weeks. Every day, Robert, Sarah, or Michael would call, and every day Harold would let Maria answer the phone. He told her to say he was busy or resting, but Harold knew he could not hide forever. The truth was, Harold was scared. He was scared of being hurt again. He was scared of believing his children cared about him, only to have them disappear when the attention died down. He was scared of forgiveness because forgiveness meant being vulnerable. One morning, Harold woke up with chest pains. They were not serious, but they reminded him that he was 98 years old. He might not have much time left. Did he want to spend his remaining years angry at his children? Or did he want to try to rebuild their relationship? Harold made a decision. He called Robert first. "Dad!" Robert sounded surprised and happy. "I'm so glad you called. I've been worried about you." "I'm fine," Harold said. "But I think it's time we talked. Really talked." "I would like that very much," Robert said. "Can I come visit you?" Harold hesitated. "Not yet. I want to talk to you and Sarah and Michael all together. I want all of you to come here at the same time." Robert was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure that's a good idea? It might be too emotional with all of us there." "I'm sure," Harold said. "I have things to say to all of you, and I only want to say them once." They arranged to meet the following Saturday at the community center. Harold was nervous all week. He practiced what he wanted to say. He thought about what questions he would ask his children. He wondered if they would be honest with him. Saturday morning came too quickly. Harold got dressed in his best clothes, which were not very good clothes, but they were clean. He went downstairs to the piano room and waited. Maria had offered to stay during the meeting, but Harold wanted to face his children alone. This was something he had to do by himself. At exactly 2 o'clock, Harold heard voices in the hallway. Maria was showing his children to the piano room. Harold's heart started beating fast. He had not seen Robert, Sarah, or Michael in over 2 years. Robert walked in first. He was 65 years old now, with gray hair and lines around his eyes. He looked older than Harold remembered. Sarah came next. She was 62 and still pretty, but she looked tired. Michael was the youngest at 58, but he looked the most worn down. All three of his children stopped when they saw Harold. Harold knew he looked different than the last time they had seen him. He was thinner. His clothes were old and worn. His hair was completely white now. He looked like an old homeless man, which is exactly what he had been. "Dad," Sarah said, and her voice was shaky. She started to cry. "Oh, Dad, I'm so sorry." Harold stood up slowly. His children came toward him, but he held up his hand to stop them. "Sit down," Harold said. "We need to talk before we hug or cry or pretend everything is okay." His children sat down in the folding chairs Maria had set up. They looked uncomfortable and guilty, like children who had been caught doing something wrong. Harold sat back down and looked at each of his children. These were the babies he had held when they were born. The children he had taught to ride bicycles and helped with homework. The young adults he had been so proud of when they graduated from college and got married. "Do you know what the worst part was?" Harold asked quietly. His children shook their heads. The worst part was not being homeless. The worst part was not being hungry or cold or scared. The worst part was feeling like you didn't love me anymore. Robert started to speak, but Harold held up his hand again. "Let me finish," Harold said. "When your mother got sick, I spent every penny we had trying to save her. I sold our car, her jewelry, my piano. I would have sold my soul if I thought it would help her. And when she died, I was broken, but I was not ashamed of being poor. I was ashamed that my own children saw me as a burden." Sarah was crying harder now. Michael was staring at his hands. Robert was trying not to cry. "When you put me in that nursing home, I understood," Harold continued. "You had your own lives, your own problems. I didn't expect you to take care of me. But when my money ran out and they threw me onto the street, where were you? When I was sleeping in parks and eating from garbage cans, where were you?" "We didn't know," Michael said quietly. "We thought you were still at Sunset Manor. We thought you were okay." Harold looked at his youngest son with sad eyes. "You didn't know because you didn't ask. You called once a week and asked if I was okay, and when I said yes, you were relieved. You didn't want to know the truth because the truth was uncomfortable." Robert leaned forward in his chair. "You're right, Dad. We failed you. We were selfish and cowardly, and we abandoned you when you needed us most. I can't change what we did, but I'm here now. We're all here now." "Why?" Harold asked. "Why are you here now? Is it because you saw me on TV? Is it because I'm famous? Is it because I have money again?" "No," Sarah said through her tears. "It's because we realized what we lost. It's because we saw how happy and strong you were without us, and we realized we didn't deserve you." Harold studied his daughter's face. She looked sincere, but Harold had been hurt too deeply to trust easily. "I need you to understand something," Harold said. "I don't need you anymore. For 2 years, I needed you desperately. I needed someone to care whether I lived or died. I needed someone to visit me and call me and remember that I existed. But I don't need that anymore." Harold gestured around the piano room. "These people became my family when you couldn't be bothered. Maria saved my life. The children here give me purpose. The other homeless people and volunteers and everyone else who comes through that door. They became my family. They love me, and I loved them." Michael was crying now, too. We know we can't undo what we did. We know we don't deserve your forgiveness, but we love you, Dad. We never stopped loving you. Love is not a feeling, Harold said firmly. Love is action. Love is showing up. Love is being there when someone needs you, not just when it's convenient for you. Harold stood up and walked to the piano. He sat down and played a soft melody while he thought about what to say next. I have thought about this moment for weeks, Harold said as he played. I have imagined what I would say to you, how angry I would be, how much I would make you suffer for abandoning me. Harold stopped playing and turned to face his children. But you know what I realized? Being angry was poisoning me. Hating you was hurting me more than it was hurting you. And life is too short to waste on bitterness. Sarah looked up hopefully. Does that mean you forgive us? I forgive you, Harold said. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. It doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was before. Harold walked back to his chair and sat down. If you want to be part of my life again, it has to be on my terms. I live here now. This is my home. These are my people. If you want to know me, you have to know them too. Robert nodded quickly. We understand. We'll do whatever you want. I don't want you to do whatever I want, Harold said. I want you to do what's right. I want you to be the kind of children who would never abandon their father again, no matter what. Harold looked around the room. This place needs help. The rent is going up. They need money for new equipment and programs. If you really want to make up for what you did, help me help them. Of course, Sarah said. We'll do whatever we can. And I want you to visit regularly, not once a year at Christmas. Not just when it's convenient. I want you to be part of my life here. I want you to know the children I teach. I want you to understand why this place is so important to me. Michael wiped his eyes. We will, Dad. I promise. Harold studied his children's faces. They looked sincere, but Harold had heard promises before. Actions, not words, he said. Show me. Don't tell me. The meeting went on for 2 more hours. Harold told his children about his time on the streets and at the community center. He told them about Maria and the children and the music programs. He told them about his concerts and his plans to help other homeless people. His children listened without interrupting. They asked questions and expressed amazement at how Harold had rebuilt his life. They seemed genuinely interested in his new family and his work. When it was time for them to leave, each of Harold's children hugged him. The hugs felt awkward at first, but Harold allowed himself to feel some of the old love he had always had. For them. Can we come back next week? Robert asked. Yes, Harold said, but come ready to work. Maria always needs volunteers, and the children could use help with their homework. After his children left, Harold sat alone in the piano room for a long time. He felt emotionally drained, but also relieved. He had faced his past and his pain. He had been honest about his hurt and his expectations. Harold did not know if his children would keep their promises. He did not know if they had really changed, or if they were just feeling guilty because of his fame. But he had given them a chance to prove themselves. Maria came into the piano room and sat next to Harold. How did it go? Better than I expected, Harold said. But time will tell if they really mean what they say. Are you glad you saw them? Harold thought about the question. Yes, I think I am. I needed to let go of my anger, and they needed to see what their choices cost all of us. That night, Harold played piano for the evening crowd at the community center. As he played, he felt lighter somehow. 6 months had passed since Harold met with his children. It was now August, and Harold was celebrating his 99th birthday. The community center was decorated with colorful balloons and handmade cards from all the children Harold taught. Harold looked around the room at his birthday party and smiled. There were about 50 people there, Maria and her family, the children from his piano classes and their parents, other volunteers from the community center, some of the homeless people Harold had befriended over the years. And in the corner, sitting together, were Robert, Sarah, and Michael. Harold's children had kept their promise. They visited every month now. Robert helped with the center's finances and legal paperwork. Sarah volunteered in the medical clinic the center had started. Michael taught computer classes to elderly people. They were not perfect, but they were trying to make up for their mistakes. "Make a wish, Mr. Harold," shouted Marcus, who was now 9 years old and could play 5 songs on the piano. Harold looked at the birthday cake Maria had made for him. It was chocolate with white frosting, his favorite. 99 candles flickered on top. Harold closed his eyes and made his wish, then blew out as many candles as he could. The children helped him blow out the rest. "What did you wish for?" asked Isabella, who was now 10 and had started singing in the church choir. "If I tell you, it won't come true," Harold said with a wink. But the truth was, Harold had not wished for anything. He already had everything he needed. After the party, Harold sat at his piano and played some quiet music while people cleaned up. Tommy, who was now 6, sat next to him on the piano bench. "Mr. Harold," Tommy said, "will you teach me to play piano when I'm older?" "I would love to," Harold said. "But I'm getting very old, Tommy. I might not be here when you're ready to learn." Tommy looked worried. "Where would you go?" Harold smiled gently. "Someday I'll go to heaven to be with my wife Maria. But don't worry about that now. I'm not going anywhere for a while." But Harold knew he was getting weaker. His hands shook more than they used to. He got tired easily. His heart medicine wasn't working as well as it had before. Harold was not afraid of dying, but he was worried about what would happen to his music programs when he was gone. The next week, Harold had an idea. He called a meeting with Maria, his children, and some of the community center's board members. Harold had been thinking about his legacy and what he wanted to leave behind. "I want to start a foundation," Harold announced. "The Harold and Maria Martinez Music Foundation. It will provide free music lessons to children whose families can't afford them. It will also help homeless people and elderly people who need a place to belong." Harold explained his vision. The foundation would support community centers like the one that had saved his life. It would provide pianos and music teachers and concerts for people who never got to experience beautiful music. "We'll need a lot of money to make this work," Robert said. He was good with business and always asked practical questions. Harold smiled. "I've been performing concerts for 6 months now. I've saved most of the money people donated to me, and I have an idea for raising more money." Harold's idea was to write a book about his life. He would tell his story honestly, the good parts and the bad parts. The money from the book would go to the foundation. Sarah offered to help Harold write the book. She had always been a good writer, even as a child. Harold was happy to work with his daughter on something meaningful. Over the next few months, Harold and Sarah spent hours together, working on the book. Harold told Sarah stories he had never shared with anyone, about his childhood during the Great Depression, about meeting Maria and falling in love, about the joy of teaching children to love music, about the pain of losing everything and becoming homeless. Sarah cried many times as she wrote down her father's words. She had never really understood what Harold had gone through until she heard the whole story. "I'm so ashamed of how we treated you," Sarah said one day as they worked on the chapter about Harold's time at Sunset Manor. "Don't be ashamed," Harold said. "Use that feeling to make sure you never make the same mistakes again. Use it to help other people who are going through what I went through." The book was called The Piano That Saved My Life, a story of music, hope, and forgiveness. It was published 6 months later and became a bestseller. People all over the world read Harold's story and were inspired by his resilience and kindness. The book raised enough money to start the foundation and support 3 community centers in different cities. Harold was invited to speak at the opening ceremonies, but he was too weak to travel. Instead, he recorded video messages from his piano at the community center. As Harold got older and weaker, he had to stop performing concerts. But he continued teaching piano lessons to the children at the community center. Even when his hands shook so much he could barely play, he could still show the children where to put their fingers and help them understand the music. Marcus, who was now 11, had become Harold's best student. He could play complex pieces and was thinking about studying music in college. Harold was so proud of the boy he had watched grow up. "Mr. Harold," Marcus said one day after his lesson, "I want to be a piano teacher like you when I grow up." Harold felt tears in his eyes. "That would make me very happy, Marcus. The world always needs more music teachers." On a quiet Tuesday morning in November, Harold woke up feeling very tired. He was having trouble breathing, and his chest hurt. Maria called an ambulance, and Harold was taken to the hospital. The doctors said Harold's heart was failing. They could keep him comfortable, but there was nothing more they could do to help him. Harold was not surprised. He was 99 years old and had lived a full life. Harold's children came to the hospital and stayed with him. They took turns sitting by his bed and holding his hand. For the first time in many years, Harold felt like they were really there for him. "Are you scared, Dad?" Michael asked. Harold shook his head weakly. "No, I'm not scared. I've done what I came here to do. I've shared my music with the world. I've helped children learn to love music the way I do. I've shown people that it's never too late to start over." Harold looked at his 3 children. "And I've learned to forgive. That might be the most important thing of all." Harold asked his children to bring him his favorite students from the community center. Marcus, Isabella, Tommy, and 5 other children came to the hospital with Maria. Harold was very weak, but he smiled when he saw the children. "I want you to remember something," he told them. "Music is magic. It can heal broken hearts and bring people together. It can turn sadness into joy and fear into hope. Promise me you'll keep making music, even when I'm not here to teach you." The children promised through their tears. Marcus held Harold's hand and said, "I'll take care of the piano at the community center, Mr. Harold. I'll make sure other children get to learn music, too." That night, Harold died peacefully in his sleep. He was surrounded by his children and Maria. His last words were, "Tell them the music never dies." Harold's funeral was held at the community center. Over 500 people came to say goodbye. There were former students from his teaching days, children from the community center, homeless people whose lives he had touched, and strangers who had been inspired by his story. The service was filled with music. Marcus played "Amazing Grace" on Harold's old piano. Isabella sang "You Are My Sunshine." A choir made up of all Harold's current and former students performed "How Great Thou Art." Instead of flowers, people were asked to donate to the Harold and Maria Martinez Music Foundation. The donations were enough to support 10 more community centers and provide music lessons to over 1,000 children. Harold's children established a scholarship fund at the local music college. Every year, one student who showed exceptional promise as a music teacher would receive free tuition and be required to volunteer at community centers serving homeless and low-income families. The old piano at the community center was restored and dedicated in Harold's memory. A plaque on it read, "In memory of Harold Martinez, who proved that music can save lives and love can conquer all." Marcus kept his promise to take care of the piano. He continued taking lessons with a new teacher, but every day after school, he would sit at Harold's piano and practice. Sometimes other children would gather around and sing along, just like they had when Harold was alive. 5 years later, Marcus was accepted to the State University on a music scholarship. He planned to become a music teacher and work with children in community centers and homeless shelters. He wanted to continue Harold's work of bringing music to people who needed hope. The community center created an annual Harold Martinez Memorial Concert every February on the anniversary of the day Harold's video went viral. Each year, hundreds of people would come to hear music and remember the homeless old man who had touched so many lives. Harold's story continued to inspire people long after he was gone. His book was translated into dozens of languages. Documentary filmmakers made a movie about his life. Music schools around the world used his story to teach students about the power of music to heal and transform lives. But perhaps Harold's greatest legacy was not his fame or the money he raised for charity. His greatest legacy was the lesson he taught about the importance of kindness, forgiveness, and never giving up hope.